My daughter, Lily, hadn't taken a step or spoken a single word for 3 years. Not since her mother's death. 3 years of silence in her cold, empty penthouse. A silence so loud it was all I could hear. Doctors, the best in the country, had all but given up on her. An army of therapists, each one more acclaimed and expensive than the last, were quietly shown the door, their useless sympathies doing nothing to break through the fortress she built around herself. I had all the money in the world, but I couldn't buy back my daughter's voice. I couldn't purchase a single footstep. Please show your support by liking this video. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story. I was on the verge of giving up. A place so dark I'd started to think we'd live there forever. That's when I hired one last nanny, an unassuming woman with tired eyes and a past she never talked about. Her methods were strange, quiet, and frankly, they made the part of me that needs to be in control suspicious, angry, even. But then, I saw it. I secretly watched her do something so unbelievable, so profoundly simple. It would defy every medical explanation I'd ever paid for and change our lives for good. The silence in my 5-year-old daughter's room was a living, breathing thing. It had weight. It pressed down on you the second you walked in. For 3 long years, Lily had existed in that silence, a beautiful doll left on a shelf. Her entire world was the antique armchair by the window. She'd sit there for hours, her gaze lost somewhere over the city, her legs still and useless. The doctors called it a profound trauma response, a psychological break that had severed the connection between her mind and her body after the accident. I just called it a prison, and I was the warden, completely powerless to open the cell door. My wife, Eleanor, had been the music in our lives. Her laughter filled every corner of our home. The car crash stole that music in a heartbeat, and this deafening silence took its place. It took my wife, and it stole the very soul of my child. So, I buried myself in work, in mergers and acquisitions, building an empire of glass and steel because it was easier to control stock prices than to face the empty eyes of my own daughter. It was a coward's escape, and I knew it. We went through 7 nannies, 7, each one arrived armed with textbook theories and pie-in-the-sky promises. There was the stern one who insisted on a rigid schedule, the bubbly arts and crafts one who left in tears after a week, and the famous therapist who charged $1,000 an hour just to sit there with her. I fired every single one of them. Their relentless hope felt like an insult to my despair, a constant reminder of how badly I was failing the only person I had left. I had given up, truly. I'd accepted that this was it for us, a father and daughter just haunting the same expensive apartment, the ghost separated by a wall of pain. Then my sister, completely fed up with me, sent one last resume. No photo, just a name, Clara Mayhew. Her qualifications were modest, a few years as a pediatric nurse, some private care experience. There was a 2-year gap in her employment history I didn't even bother to ask about. I agreed to see her, not out of hope, but just to get my sister off my back. I figured I'd have her out the door in 10 minutes, same as all the others. Clara Mayhew did not look like the saviors I'd been trying to hire. They all came in sharp suits, carrying leather briefcases stuffed with credentials. Clara showed up in a plain gray coat, her hair pulled back simply, her face pale. She had faint, dark circles under her eyes, the kind that don't come from one bad night, but from a deep, settled exhaustion. She looked fragile, and the last thing I needed was another broken person in my house. She stood in the grand marble foyer, clutching the strap of a worn canvas bag, and didn't seem to notice the soaring ceilings or the modern art that cost a Fortune, her eyes, a soft, clouded blue, weren't looking at the decor. They were scanning the space, almost like she was listening for something. "Miss Vance," she said, her voice softer than I expected. "Thank you for seeing me." "The file says you were a nurse," I said, my tone clipped. I led her into my home office, a sterile room of chrome and black leather, and didn't offer her a seat. "I wanted this over with." She confirmed, her gaze drifting down the hallway. "For 6 years. Pediatric trauma." That made me pause. Trauma. She would have seen things, but her quiet nature felt more like weakness than strength. "My daughter's condition is complex. The best specialists in the world have failed to get any results. What makes you think you can do any better?" It was a brutal question, meant to end the conversation. She didn't even flinch. She just met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something behind the weariness. It wasn't confidence. It was resolve. "I don't believe in success or failure, Miss Vance," she said softly. "I believe in presence. Children aren't problems to be solved. They're people to be with." The answer ticked me off. It was the kind of sentimental fluff I had no time for. I run a multi-billion-dollar company. I deal in results, in data, in outcomes you can measure. Presence wasn't a metric I could track on a spreadsheet. Presence doesn't pay the bills, Miss Mayhew, and it won't make my daughter walk. "No," she agreed, her calm unshaken. "It won't, but maybe it'll help her feel safe enough to want to." I should have shown her the door right then, but something about what she said, or maybe the total lack of arrogance in her voice, stopped me. She wasn't promising a cure. She wasn't selling a miracle. She was offering something smaller and, in a way, much bigger. She was just offering to be there. Against my better judgment, I heard myself say, "The trial is 1 week. You'll have a room. The rules are simple. You're here for Lily. You don't interfere with my work. You report any developments directly to me." "Understood. Perfectly," she said, with a nod so small I almost missed it. And just like that, the 8th nanny entered our silent home. I had zero hope. All I felt was that familiar dread, just waiting for the crushing disappointment I knew was coming. For the first 2 days, Clara did nothing. At least, nothing I recognized as work. She didn't try to talk to Lily. She didn't bring out any toys or storybooks. She didn't try any of the physical therapy exercises that others had forced on Lily's limp legs. Instead, she just existed. She'd bring a chair into Lily's room, place it a respectful distance away, and just sit there for hours. Sometimes she'd read her own book. Sometimes she'd just look out the same window Lily stared out of. She spoke to Lily, but her words were quiet offerings, dropped into the silence with no expectation of a reply. "The clouds look like big, fluffy ships today," she might murmur, or, "I can hear a saxophone playing down on the street. It sounds a little sad, but beautiful." She never asked a question, never pushed with, "Don't you think so, Lily?" She just shared what she saw, narrating the world for an audience of one. It was bizarre. I watched them on the security cameras I'd installed everywhere, a habit born from paranoia and a desperate need to feel connected to my daughter. I saw Clara just sitting, and I saw Lily just sitting. It felt like a total waste of my time and money. On the 3rd day, something shifted. Clara brought a small wooden music box into the room. It wasn't a kid's toy. It was old, the varnish worn smooth. She didn't hand it to Lily. She just put it on the windowsill, wound it up, and let its simple, melancholic tune fill the air. Then it stopped. Clara didn't wind it again. She just sat. I was in my office, the camera feed on one of my monitors. When I saw it, A movement so tiny I almost rewound the footage. Lily's head, which had been fixed staring forward for 3 years, turned just a few degrees toward the silent music box. My breath caught in my chest. My heart, which felt like a stone, gave a painful lurch. I leaned closer to the screen, waiting for more, but that was it. The moment passed. Her head turned back. Was it a fluke? An involuntary twitch? I didn't know. But it was the first new thing I'd seen in 1,000 days. A tiny hairline crack in the ice. The next day, she got even weirder. She came into the room with scraps of fabric, silk, velvet, rough burlap, cool satin. She sat on the floor near Lily's chair and just ran the pieces through her own hands. With her eyes closed, "This one feels like water," she whispered to herself. "And this one, like dry leaves." She never asked Lily to touch them. She just explored the textures herself. I found myself unable to focus on work. My eyes constantly pulled back to the monitor. Late that afternoon, Clara left the room for a moment, leaving a piece of deep blue velvet on the floor. I held my breath, watching as Lily's gaze slowly dropped from the window to that scrap of fabric. Her hand, usually limp in her lap, twitched. Her fingers curled, then uncurled. It was like watching a silent, monumental battle being waged inside my daughter. And then, slowly, her arm began to move. She reached down, her movements stiff and clumsy, her little hand trembling as her fingers finally brushed against the velvet. I felt a jolt, sharp and electric. I shot up from my desk, my own hands shaking. This was not a fluke. This was something. A part of me, the cold, cynical CEO, was suspicious. What was this woman's angle? Was this some kind of performance for the cameras she had to know were there? But the other part of me, the father buried under years of grief, felt a terrifying, unfamiliar flicker of hope. I had to see it for myself. Not on the next afternoon, I cleared my schedule. I came home early, slipping into the penthouse as quietly as I could. The apartment was still, wrapped in that familiar, heavy silence. I crept down the long hallway toward Lily's room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The door was open just a crack. I peered through. What I saw made me freeze. Clara wasn't in her chair. She was on the floor, on her hands and knees, in front of Lily's armchair, and Lily was watching her. Her expression was blank, but her eyes were focused. For the first time, she wasn't looking asterisk through asterisk things. She was looking asterisk at asterisk Clara. Clara was moving with an incredible, deliberate slowness. She extended one hand forward, palm flat on the carpet. Then, painstakingly, she brought her other hand forward. It was bizarre, like watching someone move in zero gravity. She crawled a few inches, then paused, looking up at Lily with a soft, encouraging smile. "See," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's just one hand, then the other. Your body remembers. You just have to give it permission." I was floored. What on earth was this? It looked like some strange game. Anger surged through me. I was paying her a fortune to crawl around on the floor. I was about to storm in there and put a stop to this nonsense. But then Lily moved. Her right foot, in its little soft slipper, lifted off the floor, just an inch. It trembled in the air for a second before she set it back down. Clara saw it. Her smile widened, but she didn't clap or cheer. She just nodded, a silent acknowledgement. Asterisk, I see you. I'm here. Asterisk, then she did it again. One slow hand, then the other. A quiet, patient demonstration. Lily's left foot lifted, higher this time. It hovered for a few seconds before returning to the floor. I stood frozen in the hallway. my back pressed to the wall, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle my own ragged breathing. Tears were streaming down my face. It wasn't just relief, it was a crushing wave of guilt. This stranger had done more in 5 days with quiet empathy than I had in 3 years with my anger and my money. She wasn't trying to fix Lily. She was trying to connect with her. She was meeting her where she was, down in the silence, on the floor. She was showing her the way out, not by pulling, but by gently leading. I watched for nearly an hour as this sacred, silent ritual continued, a foot lifting, a leg shifting, her back straightening just a little. Each tiny movement was a monumental victory. Each one was a testament to the unbelievable power of what Clara called presence. She wasn't just in the room with Lily, she was in the asterisk moment asterisk with her, sharing the struggle, celebrating the smallest triumphs without a word. When I finally backed away from the door, my own legs felt weak. I retreated to my office and collapsed in my chair. The image of what I'd seen burned into my mind. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, humbling awe. And for the first time in 3 desolate years, the stone in my chest felt a little lighter. Hope, raw and terrifying, was starting to bloom. A week later, a violent thunderstorm rolled over the city, the kind that rattles the windows and makes the sky feel like it's cracking open. I'd always hated thunderstorms. Eleanor had loved them. She called it the sky's opera. To me, it was just noise. I was working late, trying to lose myself in contracts. The camera feed to Lily's room was on. As always, Clara was reading to her, her quiet voice a small anchor in the storm. Suddenly, a deafening crack of thunder shook the whole building, and the lights went out. The backup generators kicked, and a second later, casting the room in a dim, eerie glow, but the damage was done. On the monitor, I saw Lily Joel. Her small body went rigid. A sound came out of her mouth, not a word, but a high, thin whimper of pure terror. It was the first sound I've heard from her in 3 years, and it cut right through me. Before I could even move, Clara was in motion, but she didn't rush to Lily or say, "It's okay." She did something I never would have seen coming. She dropped to the floor and curled into a small ball, wrapping her arms over her head. "Oh," Clara said, her voice trembling, but it was an act. That was a loud one. That one scared me. I feel very small right now. I watched, completely transfixed, as my daughter, my silent, motionless daughter, reacted. She uncurled her hands from the armrests. She leaned forward, her eyes wide with concern, locked on the nanny huddled on the floor. Another boom of thunder echoed, and Clara flinched dramatically. Lily whimpered again. But this time it was different. It wasn't just fear, it was empathy. She was scared asterisk for asterisk Clara. And then the impossible happened. The moment that was forever. Divide my life into a before and an after with a raw cry of effort. That seemed to rip out of her soul. Lily pushed herself forward. Her legs, those dormant limbs, slid to the floor. She placed her hands on the armrests, her knuckles white with strain, and she pushed herself up. She stood, swaying, her legs trembling like a newborn foal's, her arms out for balance. She was standing, on her own feet. 3 years of paralysis, gone in one heart-stopping moment. My own legs gave out. I sank to my knees in my office, my eyes glued to the screen, unable to process the miracle I was seeing. But it wasn't over. Lily took a step, a clumsy, shuffling, hesitant step toward Clara, then another, and another. She crossed the room, step by agonizing step, and when she reached the small figure of the nanny, she collapsed onto her, wrapping her tiny arms around Clara's neck, and then she spoke. Her voice was a rasp, a dusty, unused thing. But the word was crystal clear. Kay. She whispered into Clara's hair, said Kay. The storm raged on outside, but in my heart, there was a profound and total silence. The silence of awe. The silence of a world made new. I saw Clara wrap her arms around my daughter, holding her tight, her own shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She had pretended to be scared so my daughter could be brave. I scrambled to my feet and I ran. I ran down the hall, my expensive shoes pounding the marble, my heart about to burst. I threw open the door to her room. They were still on the floor, clinging to each other in the dim light. They both looked up, their faces streaked with tears. Lily's eyes, my daughter's eyes, weren't vacant anymore. They were alive. They were shining. I fell to my knees in front of them. I reached out a trembling hand and placed it on Lily's back. She was real. I looked at Clara, my voice breaking. How? I whispered. How did you do this? Clara looked at me, her gaze steady. I didn't do anything, Miss Vance, she said softly. She did it all. I just reminded her that she could. She pulled back and looked down at the little girl in her arms. You were so brave, Lily. You protected me. Lily looked from Clara to me, and a tiny, fragile smile touched her lips, my daughter's smile. I hadn't seen it in a lifetime. In that moment, I was no longer a millionaire or a CEO. I was just a father, witnessing the breathtaking return of his daughter, and I knew, with a certainty that shook me to my core, that nothing would ever be the same. In the days that followed, the house began to breathe again. The silence was replaced by new sounds, the soft scuff of Lily's slippers as she practiced walking, the whisper of her voice as she rediscovered words like forgotten treasures. And then, laughter. It started small, but it grew stronger every day, a sound more valuable than every asset in my portfolio. I canceled meetings. I ignored my phone. I learned to sit on the floor. Clara taught me, not with words, but by example. We played with the music box. We felt the fabrics. We spent hours in the garden, where Lily took her first steps on soft grass, her face tilted toward the sun. One evening, I finally looked at the employment file on my desk, at that 2-year gap in Clara's history. One phone call to her old hospital gave me the answer. Clara's younger brother had been in a coma for 2 years after an accident. She had quit her job, given up everything to sit by his side. He never woke up. She hadn't just been present for Lily. She was giving my daughter the miracle she couldn't give her own brother. The knowledge was humbling. That night, I found her in the living room, looking out at the city lights. You're not her nanny anymore, Clara, I said quietly. She turned, confusion and hurt in her eyes. Mr. Vance, your family, I interrupted, my voice thick with emotion. If you'll have us. A tear traced a path down her cheek, but this time it was followed by a real, brilliant smile that lit up her entire face. I know our story sounds like something from a movie, something that defies easy explanation, but it's ours. A man who thought he commanded the world, had to watch his world fall apart to understand that healing doesn't come from power or wealth. It comes from connection. It comes from the quiet courage to sit with someone in their darkness until they're ready to find the light again. Clara didn't just teach my daughter how to walk. She taught me how to live. She brought our family back from the dead, and that's a miracle no amount of money can ever buy. If this story of family secrets and ultimate vindication moved you, please show your support by liking this video. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't